Hey guys, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know we like to take things that look one way on the surface and then use the Kabbalah map of reality to dig underneath and find out what's really going on. In this episode, we're going to deal with this concept called misinformation. If you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe, and you can also check us out at yesodblocks.com. We have a whole website there with lots and lots and lots of other extensive Torah content, so check it out. So if you've been following the news, you know that Elon Musk just bought the platform of Twitter, which was a pretty big deal. And there's a lot of people who are looking at that and saying that's actually very dangerous, because what's going to end up happening as a result is that there's going to now be a proliferation of misinformation on the Twitter platform. And then people are going to start thinking things that are not true and that are dangerous and that are damaging as a result. So let's think about that and examine that a little bit carefully. So what exactly is misinformation? In order to understand that, we have to look at this Kabbalah map of the inner workings of a person that gives rise to something that we call an opinion. Let's just examine what exactly is an opinion. So in Kabbalah, there's this concept, there's this thing really called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's the root of all the things in the Torah. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is this fruit that was eaten in the Garden of Eden. It's called in Hebrew the Eitz Hadat Tov Hara. And people ate from this tree, and it actually changed the way that our minds work. So the way that our minds work now is a function of that tree. Let's give an example exactly how that looks in the real world. So imagine a puzzle. You see a big puzzle with all of the puzzle pieces right in front of you. And so you see that entire picture. That's the way that our minds worked before we ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. After we ate from that tree, then what happens is we start taking pieces of that puzzle and we say, you know what, this piece of the puzzle is more interesting to me than other pieces. I'm now going to weight this more in my mind. I'm going to take only certain parts of the story and I'm going to say, okay, I see the rest of it, but that's going to fade into the background. And the pieces that are significant to me, I'm going to give them more weight in my mind. And that is the idea of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, is that it's not good and evil objectively, it's what's good for me, what I find interesting, and what's bad for me, what I'm not interested in. So now I'm taking the things I'm interested in and weighting them more heavily. And that is exactly the definition, but also the foundation of how we create what we today call opinions. An opinion is where you take only parts of the story because they're more significant to you, and you weight them more heavily because they matter to you more personally or more subjectively. And so an example could be really in any societal debate that's going on now. I mean, it happens all the time, even in small ways. A classic example will be the debate of abortion. In the debate of abortion, there's two sides. One is pro-abortion and pro-women's rights is how they describe it, and the other side is anti-abortion and pro-child's rights, pro-fetus's rights. And what's happening is both sides really care about the big story. The big story is human life matters. And the question is, well, what do we do in a situation where we have a conflict, where we have a woman who now has a baby that she doesn't want, and then there's also the baby's life, and these two different lives are now pitted against each other in a certain way. So if you are pro-abortion, then you say the woman's life is more significant, and the child is not even really a child yet, so I can now justify saying that it should be in the background. It's less significant. I'm weighting it that way. And there's many other factors as well. You could say, well, it depends on what the reason is that the woman got pregnant or whatever. And then similarly, the other direction, you could say if you're someone who's anti-abortion, you'll say, no, this child's life is actually a life, and it's as significant as the woman's, and we have to figure out how to balance these things. So now you're weighting it more this way. And so what's happening is there's an array of information, but we're weighting it according to our own personal preferences, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, why am I weighting it that way? Is it because I grew up with a certain perspective? Is it because I actually relate more to a certain way of thinking here for some other reason? But either way, there's the information itself. There's my own personal relationship with the information that then leads me to weight it differently. That is the definition of opinion. Now let's think for a second. That sounds an awful lot like what people mean when they say the idea of misinformation. What's misinformation? Let's look at the coronavirus pandemic situation for a second and describe an example of classic misinformation. So here's the most obvious one. In the first year of the pandemic, so there was a lot of emphasis by the White House team to emphasize the issue of test numbers, of case numbers rather. How many people were testing positive? So we saw there was an increase in positive cases over the year. Now, when you hear that, it's reported very often. So what's happening is people are telling you in the media and in the reporting, on the internet, wherever, that there is higher and higher case numbers. Now, the question, of course, is, well, how do we separate that information from the rest of the story and see it clearly? Because if I just tell you there are higher case numbers, you better be very scared. So then, of course, it's going to start being confusing for you, because you're like, oh, well, if there's more case numbers and you're telling me to be scared, it must mean that there's just the virus is spreading dramatically, and therefore that's why there are more case numbers. So the problem was, of course, as everybody knows at this point, that's why this example is so obvious, that there were also more tests being done because we got the testing apparatus in place more and more and more effectively. So there were more there were higher case numbers because there were also more cases being caught. even if many of those cases were actually asymptomatic. So what you have now is a situation where there's a piece of data, more positive cases, and then you have more information in the background that can give a bigger picture of what that information means, but the information is being presented over here. And so this is very prominent now. It's like, well, that's the main thing. We should just look at only the rising case numbers. Again, I'm really simplifying this a lot. Obviously, there were a lot more things that happened. But the point I'm making is that is the definition of misinformation. It's where you're getting part of the story and the rest of the story is being faded into the background, and now it can confuse you as to what's going on. So the thing to take away from that is, okay, wait a second. The idea of an opinion and the idea of misinformation, it seems like it's exactly the same thing. And that's exactly what Elon Musk is saying when he says he wants there to be more freedom of speech on Twitter. Then people are saying back to that, well, wait a second. There's more freedom of speech, so then there'll be more misinformation. And that's like a cover, and I'll show you why it's a cover, and what I don't know. I'm not saying it's a cover done with malignant intent. It's just that it is still a cover, perhaps by accident. Throughout history, there have been conflicts between groups. Always. Religious conflicts, secular conflicts, government conflicts, and these conflicts have always been structured the same way. One group has a set of ideas that looks like this, and they do not like that there is another group that has a set of ideas that look like this. Religious conflicts are the easiest ones to see this. They're simply, I have an idea of how the world is. You don't agree with me? I'm going to now murder you and your entire family. That's how these things are structured. So it's like there's this set of perspectives that are weighted in a certain way, and the other group has a different weighting. And now the first group says, but I'm justified because I'm right. That's what makes me different than you. This, what I'm saying, is the truth. Here's the whole picture. This is what's happening. And the other group is saying, no, we see it differently from you, and that's not the truth. And so that's what has been going on throughout history. Only in the last 100 years or so, especially in the Western world, has there been, and it depends on which time periods in the last 100 years. I mean, that is what defined Europe during the World Wars, but certainly American culture has been built on the idea that there are different perspectives, different opinions, and what we can do is if you see it this way, and I see it this way, then if we combine, we can each learn to let go of our own personal biases and actually see the whole thing. Because we each have some part of the picture. So if I see this is important, and for you, this is important, well, then we can bring it together, and then suddenly both of these things can be seen. That's the whole idea of working together with differences of perspective. That's real diversity, where you can actually have differences of perspective that come together to create greater understanding of the totality of the information body and information array. So when we say on Twitter today, oh, I don't want there to be more misinformation, what you are saying by definition is, I don't want there to be other opinions that are not true, because that's going to cause harm. And that's the sad part is that actually that hasn't been shown to really be something that has caused so much harm. What has caused harm is that there has been this sense of suspicion that when I read some person's information, so I'm like, I can't tell if this is an opinion or this is the whole story, because I know that the Twitter platform blocks out certain pieces of information from the big picture and says, this information is dangerous, it's misinformation. We don't want you to know the rest of that big picture, because otherwise you're going to start thinking things that are dangerous. So then we lose trust in the platform. And all Elon Musk is saying is, let's undo the das tov hara. Let's undo the distortion of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Let's let all the opinions be on the platform and also be seen to be opinions. If I say opinion X, I say, oh, there's rising case numbers. I say, oh, I think that abortion is good. So let there be people who can say the opposite of that, and let them say that as strongly as they want. And then if you connect more to one, then you can connect to that one. If you connect to the other one, you connect to that other one. But either way, it allows for the clash of the two different sets of opinions in a way that now everybody can say what it is that they think. And then we can actually start to get past this suspicious battling where we're not sure if we even are seeing the whole story. Instead, we can now confront the opinions in their truth and in their fullness, and then we can actually combine and say, oh, you think this, I think that. Some people will then be able to, by getting exposed to the diversity of opinions, they can then develop a bigger picture of what's really going on. That's the whole point of opinionated debate. So the bottom line of this video is to try to articulate that both misinformation and opinions are structured in exactly the same way. And just like we learned over thousands of years that having opinionated polarization is simply a tribalistic form of war. So that we're having exactly the same thing happen now in the environment today. And the only solution to that is not to try to control in some other way what people are saying. It's let everybody talk, Everybody developed their own ideas, and that's what's been going on for hundreds of years already. In America, even before there was Twitter, a lot of people had lots of wrong ideas in their head, lots of wrong opinions, thought different things. That was very common, very normal. But now we're getting exposed to them because we suddenly see them all on Twitter. That doesn't change the fact that they're allowed to have those opinions, and only by letting them have that, and letting all of us have our opinions, can we then really learn to work together to build a true picture of what's really going on. And that is actual diversity that is designed to bring us to higher states of true inclusivity, not diversity based on skin color or based on other random labels, but actually diversity of understanding of the pictures of what's going on in reality, that if we can actually, I see it this way, I want to now learn to see how you see it, then we can combine those things into a larger whole that is a fuller truth of reality. That is the whole goal of the Torah, actually, is to undo the das tov hara, the tree of knowledge of good and evil's distortions. That's the whole goal of the Torah, and it's also the goal, as far as I can tell, of what Elon Musk is saying when he describes trying to create that with his acquisition of Twitter. So I hope that was clarifying and helpful, and that you enjoyed that. If you did, please like and subscribe and support what we're doing. You can also head over to yesodblocks.com and subscribe there to our platform and join what we're doing there as well. Have an awesome time, and looking forward to seeing you in the next video.